Hi everyone, welcome to the Med to Be. My name is Nama Nzadiru. I am the founder. If this is your first time coming across the Med to Be, we are a health media and professional development organization focusing on encouraging people to pursue careers in healthcare and also promoting health education for things we do every day, sleeping, exercising, and eating. And today we are focusing on the eating aspect and talking about food preservation. Now, food preservation is something that affects our lives every single day. If you're a pickle lover, if you're a canned tomato lover, if you love to eat, you've probably come across something that has been preserved in one way or the other. And up until recently, I hadn't really thought about how the process of food preservation affects my everyday life until I connected with Jennifer and Sherri here. And they are going to give us a presentation on Food Preservation 101, the basics, along with food safety and tips. They are representatives from Rutgers, and they're going to take the floor and give us the basic steps on how to be more mindful about what we eat when it comes to preservation and making wholesome choices with food preservation. Thank you so much, ladies, for being here. I'm going to give you the floor and give you a round of applause too. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, well, thank you. I'm just going to get my screen shared. So my name is Jen Salt Taylor, and I am with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, so Family Communities Health Sciences Department. And Sherri, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Everyone. I'm Sherri Cirignano, and I am also in the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences. I am located in Warren County.
Oh yes, I'm in Passaic County, so we're both in New Jersey. Obviously, we're with Rutgers. But today we're going to talk a little bit about food preservation. But what we like to do first is just make sure that we let you all know that Rutgers is an equal opportunity access and non-discrimination agency. So we are affirmative action, equal opportunity employer and provider. So we do not discriminate based on anything for our programs. Should you feel discriminated against for any reason, here is some information on how you could report that. We always just want to make sure that you have that information up front. We also like to give you a little bit of information about the cooperative extension structure. So the Rutgers Cooperative Extension is a partnership between the County Board of Commissioners, Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and the United States Department of Agriculture. So we receive funding from those three different agencies, and we are the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of each county. So each county has a cooperative extension. And within that extension, we have three different departments. So there's agricultural natural resources who work with our farmers. They work on water conservation, food waste, environmental programs, those sorts of things. We have 4-H youth development. So that is your after school clubs, your summer programming. They do everything from gardening and to STEM and STEAM and art clubs. So depending on what the community is interested in. And then you have us. So we're the Family and Community Health Sciences Department, and we focus on nutrition and wellness in many different aspects we'll get into. And the idea is that we get all this lovely information from the university, and we're here to help bring it out into the community. So we all work in our own counties to really be there with the community to help educate the community, but also learn from the community and bring that back up to the university to say like, okay, this is what's going on in the community. Like maybe we need to do some more research on this, kind of focusing on that cyclical aspect of research. Okay, so today we are going to do a little introductory session. We just want to focus on letting you know that this is not going to be able to teach you how to preserve all your foods by yourself kind of thing, but we want to motivate you to be able to learn more and kind of start that learning, right? So we're going to share practical tips and we're going to focus on the importance of food safety. So we'll go through the benefits of home food preservation. Again, the food safety basics. We do like to harp on that. The different methods we can use, and then where you can learn more if you want to keep learning more about this process. So what are the benefits? There is a little bit to think about with cost savings, right? So we're going to reduce food waste by preserving excess produce harvested from maybe from your garden, or if you're buying from a local farmer's market or producer, you can buy in bulk when it's in season, and then you can preserve it for yourself for future use. Also, local sourcing reduces added cost of transportation and packaging, so that helps you save money. You're also going to be able to make your own quality products. So you can use your own quality ingredients or make sure you're purchasing quality ingredients that are going in. I don't know if you've ever heard the term garbage in, garbage out, but we don't want to deal with that with food preservation. We want to use these high quality materials. The other thing you can think about is making it to your taste. So maybe there's unique flavors that you want to add. We'll go through the kind of the technicalities of recipes a little bit, but there is some ways that you can make it your own. And then sustainability and control. So you want to reduce transportation and packaging. Like we said before, that can introduce a little bit added cost, but it also adds to a little bit of its environmental implications, right? So you also get to control what goes into each product. So if you're eating tomato sauce you purchase, you didn't get to make that, but if you're eating tomato sauce that you made yourself and then preserved, you know exactly what's in there. And again, making sure that we're supporting our local economy and our community by purchasing local ingredients. And then practicality. So we want to eat seasonal produce throughout the year. And so what we can do with the preservation is we are able to extend the shelf life of that product. So it could also have a reliable source of food during emergencies. So we've seen a few different emergencies. I live up in State County. I'm in the woods. Our power goes out quite a bit. So having some extra food on the hand is always a good thing. And then it's also important to have your personal sense of independence and self-reliance. So knowing that you can do this for yourself and for your family. So when we say home food preservation, what is it? So we're thinking about the safe food preservation stops or slows the natural spoilage process, right? So we're preventing the growth of harmful bacteria and we're preserving the nutritional value, taste, color, and texture. We do like to point out that it's not a new concept, but there are new recipes and equipment available. So it's a little bit of an evolving science, but we do want to make sure we do follow that science. And then I'm going to pass it over to Sherri for the focus on food safety.
Okay, so anytime we work with food in any way, and definitely when we're engaging in food preservation, we want to think about food safety. We want to focus on things that are important when it comes to food safety. And we're given these 4 words that help us kind of stay focused on food safety. These are words that you probably have heard before, but we'll dig in a little bit deeper to explain what it means. So clean, separate, cook, and chill. Go ahead, Jen. We'll focus on clean first. So it's obvious that we will wash our hands a lot. We really got a great taste of that during the pandemic. Everybody learned how to really wash their hands well, using lots of soap, making sure there's running water, and we're scrubbing for 20 seconds and rinsing and using a single-use towel to dry our hands to make sure we're not passing bacteria onto our clean hands. So that's obviously really important. But besides washing our hands, we want to make sure that everything that the food is going to touch is clean as well. So the utensils, the cutting boards, even any surface that the food might be on definitely needs to be kept clean, especially after contact with any raw meats, poultry, seafood, or eggs. It's also really important to clean our fruits and vegetables. So they definitely should be washed before we use them, but it is not recommended to wash meat, poultry, fish, or eggs. Okay. The second word is separate. So we think of that right away. We think of eliminating the opportunities for any cross-contamination. So we want to separate anything that is not going to be cooked from those things that are cooked. One example, of course, is keeping raw meat and poultry away from food that isn't going to be cooked. Another important one, though, is keeping any washed fruits and vegetables separate from those that haven't been washed yet. We also want to keep our plates and utensils separate when we're thinking about the cooked versus the raw foods. And even as far back as at the store, when you are picking up your foods, for example, meats, poultry, etc., you want to think about where you're putting them in the cart. You're not putting your kind of dripping raw chicken on top of your fruit, for example. Even in your shopping bag, you want to pack your shopping bag in that same way, making sure that things are separate. When you get home, keep them separate, both in your, wherever they're going to be housed, in your refrigerator and your freezer. And it's encouraged to put any meat, poultry, anything along those lines on your bottom shelf. Okay, next slide, please. So then third word is cook. And what cooking is all about is making things are the proper temperature. The only way to know for sure that a food is cooked to the proper temperature is to use a food thermometer. So I encourage you all, if you don't have one, to think about getting one. This is important for sure during food preservation when canning, and also when you're cooking, everyday cooking. So you want to know, if you don't know, the minimum safe internal temperatures of all meat and poultry and egg dishes. And you want to keep your hot foods hot and cold foods cold. So foods that are hot should be at 140 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and cold food should be kept at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. There's actually a zone where we don't want to go with our food for very long, and that is between 41 and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. That's considered the danger zone. So we want to try to keep our food, like it says, hot food's hot, cold food's cold. When measuring our food, we definitely want to use the correct thermometer and the correct thermometer methods. Reheat food carefully, especially in the microwave. And chill is really important. This is important in food preservation as well. And if you're thinking about something that you maybe had in the freezer that you now want to do something else with, you want to can it, for example, you want to thaw that food in one of four ways. And this is especially important when we're talking about those meat and poultry items. So in the refrigerator is a very safe way, and maybe the safest way to thaw food. But you can also run clean, drinkable running water over the food at 70 degrees or lower. You can thaw food in a microwave if it's going to be cooked immediately. And you can also thaw food as part of the cooking process. It's really never recommended to thaw or marinate food outside of the refrigerator. And again, hold food at 40 degrees or lower. And next slide. So as a reminder, if you're not aware of what your refrigerator should be set at to keep the foods inside of it safe, it should be at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and your freezer should be set at 0 degrees Fahrenheit or below. We're approaching the warm months of the year, so this is a reminder to take perishable foods and put them into a refrigerated or freezer situation if it's been out for when it's been out for no more than 2 hours. So that changes a little bit if the temperature is 90 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. If it is, then perishable foods should be brought in after being out for no more than 1 hour. To cool things, it's really important to try to put them in shallow containers and refrigerate properly for quick cooling. Things will cool quicker if they're in a shallow container. Another really important thing to remember is if you're preserving by freezing, the food coming out after you have thawed it is the same as the food that you put in, meaning freezing does not destroy any harmful germs. So we want to remember all of the things that we just talked about with regard to food safety to make sure that the food is safe going into the freezer. Oh, and botulism. So I love that Jen put this on a black slide. It's very telling. Botulism is kind of a scary word, and it's something that's caused by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. And it's something where it's very common. These spores can be found in soil and marine sediment. So they're on surfaces of fruits, vegetables, and seafood. And as by themselves, they're not harmful to us. But if they are put in the right conditions, they can actually sprout to very dangerous cells. And those conditions are very low oxygen and low acidity. And that can occur in certain canning ways of food preservation. So we'll talk about that a little bit further on in the presentation, but just keep in mind that this can grow in very low oxygen, even next to no oxygen, and low acidity. So the symptoms of botulism you see here, they're not great and can even lead to death. So this is a serious situation. How do we prevent it? We want the right amount of heat to destroy the spores. And we want to also make sure that we are inhibiting the ability for those spores to turn into vegetative cells, which could be dangerous to humans.
Okay, so what kind of methods are we going to talk about today? So we're going to do a little bit about freezing. So this is one of the easiest and kind of least time-consuming methods of your engaged time. As Sherri said, it doesn't really sterilize the food, but does slow the growth of microorganisms and chemical changes so your food lasts a bit longer. We'll do a little bit about drying. So it's one of the oldest methods, and it can be combined with other food preservation methods too. We'll get a little bit into that. We do have the luxury of having some modern food dehydrators available to make it a little bit easier for you. And the benefit of drying food is it takes up a lot less space. It's a lot lighter. So let's say you're going camping or hiking or something, it's an easy way to bring some food. We'll go a little bit into pickling, a way to add some spice and flavor to your meals. And there's a variety of flavor and ingredient options to explore. And we're going to talk about water bath canning and pressure canning. So in both of these methods, foods are placed in jars and heated to a temperature that destroys microorganisms. So one method's going to be for high acid foods, the other is going to be for low acid foods. And Sherri will get into that a little bit more. And then jams and jellies. So this is traditionally used to prolong the shelf life of seasonal fruit, right? So we got some lovely berries here in the summer. So we want to make sure we can eat them all or we can use them throughout the year. So in all of those methods, we do have some general guidelines for food preservation that we want to follow. I've said it earlier already, but we're going to kind of reiterate it, is that we want to use only scientifically tested recipes to ensure the safety when we're doing food preservation. This becomes very important with our canning, but it is important for everything else as well. With our produce or whatever we are going to be preserving, we want to make sure that we're starting with fresh, firm fruits or vegetables that are free of spoilage. So again, we don't want that garbage in, garbage out. We want to use that high quality ingredient to make sure that we're getting the highest quality end result, right? And measuring. So we want to weigh or measure our amounts carefully. This kind of goes back to our scientifically tested recipes. So we want to make sure that we're following them and we're using the right amounts, whether it is either weighed or measured, and we know how to do that properly because that can really affect the recipe. It can affect the taste. It can affect the spoilage, that sort of thing. And then amounts. So most methods, you're going to benefit from storing them in a single serve size for your family. So if you're a family of one and you want to start canning something and you're canning in these huge quart jars, but you're only eating a little bit at a time, you're going to increase the risk of spoilage of those products. So you're going to want to think about what the end use is for what you're preserving so that it makes sense for what you're doing. And then storage. So each of our methods is going to have recommended ways to store the items for the highest quality products, okay? There's recommended storage times as well as recommended storage methods. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, so freezing is up first. So like we said before, it reduces the temperatures of food so that water becomes ice, which is inhospitable environment for microbial activity. So the goal with freezing is we really want to freeze rapidly and uniformly. So this will prevent formation of ice crystals and give you a better quality product. There is some guidelines for what doesn't freeze well, and I'll share where you can get that in a little bit. But depending on what you're freezing, you're going to use a few different methods. So when you're freezing vegetables, they should be blanched before freezing. So you can do this by steaming or boiling water, using steam or boiling water. And this stops those enzymes that can cause loss of flavor, color, and texture. If anybody's ever blanched anything, you'll see like you throw some broccoli in some boiling water and it gets that bright green, right? So we want to use that. There's very specific guidelines on what times to use for blanching. So the idea is over blanching, you're going to lose some flavor, color, vitamins, and minerals. But under blanching is going to stimulate the activities of enzymes instead of stopping them. So there's a method for everything. Don't worry, and we'll tell you where the resources are. Um, so the other thing is once you blanch, you want to cool quickly. So this is typically with an ice bath. So you take the items out of the boiling water, throw it in an ice bath to stop that cooking quickly. There's two different methods we can use for packing frozen foods. So there's dry packing or tray packing. So dry packing is going to be this picture of the blueberries, where you take everything, you throw it in your container and you put it in the freezer. The other method is called tray packing, which is looking at these strawberries on the bottom. So on the left, you'll notice the strawberries are spaced out. They have air flowing in between them. This is our ideal situation, right? So on the right, they're piled up. There's no airflow. They're not going to freeze uniformly. So depending on what you're freezing, you can choose which method works best for you. Dry pack is great because it's easy at the get-go. You throw everything in the bag or the container, you're ready to go. Tray packing is going to take a little more time. So you're going to have to lay everything out, check it after an hour, and then pack it into a container. The beauty of that, though, is when you go to use your frozen items, they're all individually frozen and not completely stuck together. So depending on what you're going to use it for in the end, that's what you want to think about. And then we're going to make sure there's headspace to allow for expansion. So as things freeze, especially liquids, they do expand. So we want to make sure that we're leaving room in our containers for that so we don't have any broken containers in the freezer or damaged or spoiled goods. I did forget to mention just a little general rule of thumb for the blanching is if you're going to be doing the boiling water, it's about 1 gallon of water per pound of vegetables. So just thinking about that. So that's enough water so that the water isn't going to cool down too much when you put those vegetables in. So it'll continue to stay boiling. And then so we want to think about our containers for freezing, right? So when we're talking about fruits or veggies, basically, if you're going to do that dry packing and you're throwing them in a gallon-sized container, is going to be okay. But anything over a gallon-sized container is they're going to freeze too slowly. So you're going to lose a lot of that quality. With the containers, we want to make sure that they're moisture vapor resistant, meaning that there's no moisture or air getting into that container because that's going to cause a decrease in the quality of your product. So we want the containers to be durable and leak proof. We don't want to use containers that can become brittle or crack in low temperatures. That in an ideal world, they're resistant to oil, grease, or water, and they will protect foods from absorption of off flavors or odors. Additionally, that making sure they're easy to seal, so however they close, you can handle that easily and easy to mark. So that's something else that actually we should have put on the general guidelines and I forgot to, is you want to make sure you're labeling everything with what's in the container, the date, and how much of it there is. All right, so a little trick that we like to do is when you're planning on freezing some items, what you can do is turn your freezer down to the lowest setting so that your freezer is really cold, so you're going to get that really fast freeze. And when you're putting stuff in the freezer, you don't want it to look like this picture here. When you're initially freezing things, you want the airflow to be able to go around those products. Once those packages are frozen, you can stack or store them really tightly when they're already frozen so that they kind of stay cold together. There's just some examples here of two different ways you can use to wrap meat and or like a seafood to put it in the freezer. So the one's called a butcher wrap and the other's a drugstore wrap. But you want to just make sure that you're using that like moisture vapor resistant paper. There's specific freezer paper you can use. All right, and drying. So the idea with drying is we remove the moisture so that bacteria, yeast, and mold can't grow and spoil the food. So we're also slowing down the enzymes that cause foods to ripen. Like I mentioned earlier, they become smaller and lighter weight. So there's a few different methods you can use. There's outdoor methods, which are solar or sun drying. Something to think about with them is they should be pasteurized just to make sure that if in case there's any insects or insect eggs that got on the food, that would kill them. The indoor methods we can use is a food dehydrator or oven. So food dehydrators come in a couple different methods or a couple different ways. You have some that are stacked and then the fans on the bottom and the air flows up, or you have some that are stacked and the fans on the side and the air flows horizontally. Concern about the vertical method, so if the fan's on the bottom and the trays are all above it, the flavors can mix a lot more. And then also anything, if you have any juices of any sort, they can drip onto the fan mechanism. So that's just something to think about if you're looking to purchase a dehydrator. With the oven, you do want to make sure that you have an oven that either has a fan or you can leave it open a little bit. Just making sure that that's safe in your household, depending on if there's children or pets running around, you want to make sure that that's a safe option. So there's a couple of things you can think about when you're looking for a dehydrator. A double wall construction of metal or high grade plastic. Wood is not recommended. First, it's really hard to clean, but also other things can get into it. You want an enclosed heating element, so whatever the food or anything gets on it, there's not going to be any sort of issue. There's a lot of countertop design, there's enclosed thermostats, and make sure that you can go from 85 degrees to 160. That'll give you a lot more variety of options in what you can do. There's some other stuff here, you can take a look at it, but there's just some ideas on what you want to look at. The timer is great because depending on when you're doing it, drying can take a long time. So if it turns itself off, that could be a very helpful trick. So when we're drying foods, it's important to think about what we're drying and what needs to be done. So fruits, for example, can be pre-treated, so that'll help stop them from darkening. For example, made some apple chips the other day, but you dip them in apple juice with a high vitamin C, and that helps them from turning brown before you put them on in the dryer. You also want to condition your fruits after drying. So fruits are going to be dried to about a 20% moisture content. And what conditioning does is after you finish the drying process, you're going to put them all in one container and leave that there for about 7 to 10 days. And all the fruit is not going to be exactly at 20%, but that helps equalize it all out so that the fruit will last longer. Then once you have that 7 to 10 days, you can take it and put it into your regular whatever serving size containers you want to store it in. So vegetables are going to be a little bit different. You don't have to condition them, but they're going to want to contain only about a 10% moisture, so they'll be very brittle and almost crisp when you're done drying them. To store, oh, I put soup and mix example in the book, sorry. I was gonna share a soup mix example. I will maybe send that over at the end. So we want to store them in a cool, dark place. You can keep them in the freezer. That will extend their shelf life. And then we just want to make sure we're following proper rehydration techniques and ratios. So over soaking foods can cause flavor loss or mushy texture. And if you're soaking them for over 2 hours, again, we don't want them to be in that danger zone. So it should be done in the refrigerator. And we have pickling. So with pickling, our ingredients are of the utmost importance. So we want to use salt that is either designed for pickling or canning, and they don't have non-kicking agents in them. So non-kicking agents in the salt, regular salt, can make your brine cloudy. It could also make your cucumbers or whatever you're pickling get extra soft. Vinegar, you want to make sure you're using at least 5% acidity. So generally white or cider vinegar can be used. If you're pickling very light colored items such as cauliflower, you're going to want to use the white vinegar because sometimes the cider vinegar can cause discoloration. Sweetener, so we have granular white or brown sugar are most often used. Honey or corn syrup can be used if it's in the recipe that you're using. But if you're not following a recipe that calls for that, and you use that instead, it can cause some undesired flavors. And then if you're using cucumbers to pickle, you want to make sure that you discard 1/16 of an inch slice from the blossom end of each cucumber. So that contains an enzyme which can cause excessive softening of pickles. So you want to make sure you're going to cut those off so you get nice crisp pickles. So acidity level is important for safety, taste, and texture. So we want to make sure that there's a minimum uniform level of acid throughout the mixed product to prevent the growth of botulinum bacteria, right? That's one of the things we're very concerned about. And then depending on the recipes you're following, we've got some fermented pickled items that can be fermented for 1 to 3 weeks. And then we have curing times too. So this will help develop the flavors and increase acidity of the product. So non-fermented pickles are often brined, drained, and covered in vinegar and spices. And you can do fruit pickles, which are heated in seasoned syrup that has been acidified. Relishes are chopped fruits and vegetables. And then just a note is that canning is required to inhibit spoilage from microorganisms and enzymes that might affect the flavor, color, and texture. So after you're done with the pickling process, you're going to want to run them through a canning process as well. I'll give it back over to you, Sherri.
And so, yeah, that led me right into the canning section. And what canning is doing is it's removing oxygen, it's destroying enzymes and preventing the growth of that undesirable bacteria. And also yeasts and molds are being prevented. So as the canning process is finished, it is driving air out of that jar or can. And as it cools, a vacuum seal is formed so no air can get into the jar. There are certain techniques that we definitely follow. As Jen mentioned, it's all about the recipe, and only using tested recipes is recommended. And we'll give you some information on where to find them when we complete the presentation. We do have some information for you about that. But we really, strongly encourage people to understand that recipes are tested when it comes to canning foods, when it comes to the size of the jar to use, the food that's being used, how big the food is being cut up, or if it's being cut up, maybe it's not, maybe it's kept whole, and all the ingredients that are put into the actual product. So there are some techniques like hot packing versus cold packing foods. A lot of foods are hot packing. Think about making jam. As you might imagine, you cook the fruit, and when it's bubbling and ready, that's a hot pack that would be put into jars. Sometimes we've talked a lot about acid here today, and acid is important. So some recipes will call for additional acid for some fruits. And you want to use the correct the correct equipment, such as jars and self-sealing lids. You would never want to reuse those lids. You always want to get new ones if you are going to venture out and start canning. There is something called headspace, which is the distance between the top of the food and the top of the jar. And the recipes are very specific about how much space that needs to be. It may be an inch, it may be a quarter of an inch. It's very important to follow that guideline that's in a recipe. And canning can occur in either a water bath or a pressure canner. So the difference between those two is very important. I'll talk about that in just a second. The acidity level is really what determines which method is used. And another important thing to know is that processing times, although they're given in a recipe, they're based on elevation. So it may say the processing time is a certain amount, but if you are at a high elevation, for example, your processing time will be different. And every canning reference will give you information on how to figure out what that time would be for you. And a lot of recipes just include that information. Another important thing to know about canning is that when you can food, you want to only can what you feel you can eat within a year, because it's recommended that you do consume it all within a year. All right, so the two different methods are water bath canning and pressure canning. The difference is basically water bath canning is done in a very deep, kind of heavy pot where that has something at the bottom of it.
Like a rack.
A rack, sorry. Canning rack at the bottom of it, so that when you put jars into it, they don't actually touch the bottom of the pot. That could cause breakage. And you don't have to buy a special pot to do this. They do sell special pots, but as long as it's deep enough so that the water will cover the top of the jars within a few inches of water. Like water should be totally covering it. Or like about an inch to an inch and a half. And a lot of recipes will say exactly how far the water should be over the jar. High acid foods are the only foods that should be processed in a water bath canning pot. So they are foods that have a pH of 4.6 or less. If you remember anything back in when you were in chemistry in school and you learn about the pH of foods and a pH of everything, 4.6 or less is a highly acidic food. So some foods, as I mentioned earlier, they may have acid added to them to reach that pH. And you want to follow again that tested recipe. So something like lemon juice is often used to increase the acidity of fruit, for example, that may not have the correct amount of acidity to be safely processed, even in a water bath canning. So the jars are usually sterilized before we fill them, and then they're put into the canner and covered with the water. And then it's a boiling situation where you start to time it when everything is boiling, and then you remove it carefully afterwards. So there's a lot more to water bath canning. This is just an introduction to it. But we wanted to give you the important information, which is that there are some foods that can be canned in water bath canning. And basically that is fruit. Fruit can be put in there. Those are the primary foods that are acidic enough to go into the water bath canning method. Pressure canning is for all vegetables, and that is because they are low acid foods. What happens with pressure canning is that it reaches a much higher temperature than water bath canning does. And what that does is destroys the C. botulinum. And that is what we want to do to avoid botulism. There are a couple different types of pressure canners. Some have a dial on them, some have a weighted gauge, and that is what is used to kind of follow what the pressure is while you're canning. So a good example to think about with water bath canning is jams and jellies. So what happens with jams and jellies is we take fruit and we're preserving them with sugar, and they become thickened. The types, there are many types, believe it or not, of jams and jellies. So you see them listed here. Fruit jelly is made with the fruit juice. Jams are made with crushed or chopped fruit. Preserves are made with small whole fruits or uniform sized pieces, and they're in like a jellied syrup. Marmalades often have citrus peel in them. And fruit butters are the pulp of fruit that's cooked until it's really thick and mounds on a spoon. So it's kind of in a spreadable consistency. What you'll notice is similar to all of these types is they all have sugar added to them. So let's talk about those ingredients on the next slide. All jams and jellies require a combination of fruit, sugar, pectin, and acid, and in certain amounts based again on that tested recipe. So the fruit provides the flavor, the color, and sometimes all of the pectin, but at least part of the pectin is provided by the fruit. So different fruits provide different amounts of pectin. The sugar is an important piece. A lot of people want to try to make jam and jelly without sugar, and it can be done with very specific recipes, but sugar is really important in the process, not just to make it yummy and sweet, but also because it helps to preserve and helps to prevent the growth of microorganisms, which again is very important for the safety piece of preparing this product. So the sugar has to be in the proper ratio with the pectin and the acid for the gel to form. The pectin, as I mentioned, does come from some of the fruits, but we can also purchase prepared pectin at the store. And that, again, is important to make the gel kind of consistency of all of these jams and jelly products. The acid, also very important and needed for gel formation. And each fruit has a different amount of acidic acid level to them. So your recipe will tell you whether or not you need to add any acid to it to make the recipe work. Okay.
All right, so do you want to learn more? Hopefully we piqued your interest enough and you're like, oh, where can I find all of these recipes? So this is the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So they are a fantastic and basically our really only source for current research-based recommendations for most methods of home food preservation. The center was established with different funding from different folks, including Cooperative Extension, the United States Department of Agriculture, and I think that's it, yeah, to address food safety concerns for those who practice and teach home food preservation and processing methods. So I am going to put this in the chat if I can get my chat open real quick. Sorry, I should have had it open already. So that is the link for that. And then we just wanted to share some additional resources as well. So on our website at Rutgers for the Family Community Health Sciences Department, we have some recorded food preservation videos and webinars. There is also a book that is kind of the end all be all for what other recipes you need to find, and that's the So Easy to Preserve book. And then additionally, the United States Department of Agriculture has a complete guide to home canning. So I will put those links in the chat as well. And then I'm sharing this. Okay, host and panelists. Sometimes I only share with the host. And oh no, I'm not sharing it with everybody.
No, you are. I can see it. Wait, why are you?
Okay.
No, you have
Sometimes I don't.
to share to host and panelists. So you have to share to everyone. It's okay. If you weren't sharing to everyone, you're just sharing to host and panelists, like you said.
I don't have access to everyone, it looks like.
Okay,
So maybe you can send it out afterwards to folks.
I'll do that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then finally, Sherri and I are working on this lovely home food preservation digital badge program. So we are working on that right now. We are in the process, but our goal is to have a super engaging program so that folks can learn more about the methods that we discussed today and kind of the goal is to, while it's an online program, really have a kind of community that we grow across New Jersey and whoever else is interested. So it will be available through Rutgers University Continuing Education. If you're interested in learning more, I will share this little form so that you could all fill that out if you're interested in learning more. And then in addition, we do a brief survey for all the programs that we do. This just helps us to learn about who we're teaching to, also making sure that we're reaching diverse audiences, and we want to make sure that we're using the information to kind of develop programming in the future. So you can let us know what you're interested in learning more about. And then we have our contact information here.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Sherri. I'm gonna give you a round of applause. Round of applause. Round of applause on behalf of everybody here. Thank you so much. I had this teacher when I was in high school, a secondary school, and he would ask at the end of class, like, "Did you learn something today?" Then we'd have to shout, "Yes, I learned something today." So I want to say I definitely learned a lot today. I have my notes here. I did not know that you were supposed to blanch vegetables before you freeze them. I am guilty of not doing that. I had no idea you're supposed to do that. So I am going to try and do that now when I freeze my food. I'd also not heard of fruit butter. I think I confused fruit butter with marmalade, but there seems to be more of like a liquidy texture to marmalade versus fruit butter. So that was really, really interesting to me. And then even like the layout of freezing, there was like a picture you put of a fridge, the layout of freezing in a freezer. My fridge in my house does not look like that. It is very all over the place. So I'm like, I maybe I need to refresh that. So thank you so much. I do have a few questions. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to share them with me. And if we have time, we can share them with the panelists. But
I'll
one of my
stop sharing so we can
oh,
see each
okay.
other. How's that?
Okay. Yeah, perfect, perfect. One of my questions was about, I think for me, as a someone who's trying to be more of a conscious eater, the organic versus inorganic, discussion. There's so much information and resource and misinformation online about organic, inorganic foods. And I wonder what the difference is when it comes to preserved foods. Is it possible to have food that started out organic and then you add chemicals to it and then becomes inorganic? How does like inorganic, organic affect food preservation?
Do you want me to take that, Sherry, or you want to take a
Go
stab at
ahead.
it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So there's different levels of organic. And so depending on what you're starting with, if you're preserving your food at home yourself, and if you're starting with organic ingredients and you're preserving it, that will be an organic product. The label of USDA organic is used in a few different ways. So items can be like 95% organic ingredients and they can be labeled as organic. I believe I think it's water and salt don't have to be organic. Those are not really on the ingredient list as organic. If you are looking at foods that are already preserved, they may have that label USDA organic, or they may have made with organic ingredients. So you can take a look at the ingredient list on that label, and it'll say like organic tomatoes, and then list other ingredients that may or may not be organic. Does that kind of help a little bit? I was like, there's organic chemicals as well, so it gets a little wishy-washy in there.
I think the general consensus is to be mindful and just to be aware of where what you buy falls in that organic and organic. And also if you're gonna do it at home, be mindful of how that will affect the organic nature of the food. So thank you for that. I think my other question is, so because my platform with health education is to learn about how things we do every day affect our lives. And so I'm going to touch on diabetes really quick. So the jams and jellies, they all contain a decent amount of sugar is required. Are there alternatives that you could recommend for someone who is pre-diabetic or diabetic but still wants to enjoy jams and jellies? Or would you say maybe to avoid that form of preservation when it comes to fruits?
Okay, if I answer that, Jen?
That's
So,
that's your specialty.
oh. So I would say, first of all, there are recipes to make jams and jellies that are either low in sugar or pretty well, almost non-existent sugar or sugar substitute. You also can purchase jams and jellies that are low in sugar or no sugar. They definitely are available in stores. I would say that for someone who enjoys jams and jellies, who either has been diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes, then I would encourage them to look at their portion size. It's okay for people with prediabetes or diabetes to have small amounts of items with sugar in them. It's not, it's not, jam is not usually something we eat in large quantities at a time. So yeah, it really is okay. But if someone once they're really extra careful and they're counting their carbohydrates and their added sugars, I totally respect that. And I would say that to buy the no sugar added or find recipes. And I'm pretty sure, they're out there. I've never read one, but I've seen them in passing, that they're in the books. I have the book right here, the So Easy to Preserve. And there are no sugar
Okay.
added recipes.
Nice, that's really good to know. And then touching on another common disease or illness is hypertension. So we think sometimes, or people who want to avoid high salt, a lot of salt in their diet, but the pickling also requires a good amount of salt. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think my initial thought would be look at your serving size. How much are you having at once? So the other thing with pickles is they're very high in sodium, but what is their serving size? I do a label reading class with some folks and I always bring in the nutrition label for already made pickles, because if you look at the serving size in this particular package, the serving size is a half of a pickle. And I'm like, who's cutting pickles in half?
A half of a pickle?
Yeah.
Oh wow, never heard that. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. So the salt is a very important part of the pickling process. On the National Center for Home Food Preservation, they do have some lower sodium recipe options that you can take a look at to see if that's going to work for you if you're looking at it. The other thing is to think about, like Sherri said, what else are you having throughout the day? Is it the only high sodium thing you're having? That sort of thing.
Okay. Wow. I think what I'm learning is just the mindfulness with when it comes to eating. It's so easy to just eat anything, and it's so fast paced, just so easy, especially when we live in like a fast paced culture. But there really seems to be an emphasis on being mindful of the things that you eat, like knowing what you're putting, especially having that leverage of making it at home. So I'm so happy you shared that. My last question is to both of you, what is your favorite way to preserve your food, and what's the last thing you preserved at home or recently?
Well, we just filmed a whole bunch of preservation videos, demos for this. So we have, right now I've got tomatoes, carrots, and raspberry jam in my basement. But my personal favorite is the berries. I have a large garden and I like to do the strawberries. So I freeze them actually. So I do the tray packing when I have the patience. And so I like to do those, and then we eat the strawberries hopefully throughout the winter. They don't always make it all winter.
Very nice, very nice. What about you, Sherry?
I have to agree. I love to freeze berries. We don't grow them, but we purchase them when they're in season, large quantities and freeze them. And yeah, I really like to buy other foods, like, definitely other fruits and vegetables in quantity and freeze them. I think it's a great way to capture that in the middle of the winter to blueberries, for example, and also strawberries when you haven't had them in a couple of months. Local ones, yeah. So yeah, freezing is definitely my favorite.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Wonderful. Wonderful. I would say my favorite now sounds like it's gonna be pickling. I feel like I've tried pickling. I tried to make pickled onions, but I just freestyled the vinegar, and I'm not gonna lie, freestyled the vinegar and salt, and it did not turn out good at all. So I'm gonna have to be more mindful. I did not know about the headspace, like the space between the food and the cover of the
Top
jar.
of the jar. Mhm.
That's not something that I paid attention to. I just measured it with my heart. I'm not gonna lie. So now I have to be more mindful about that. So I'm so thankful that I had this conversation with you guys. And I'm just so hopeful that everyone here learned at least one thing that they can take to their kitchen and use to improve what they eat and what they consume. I'm so thankful that you guys are both here, Jennifer and Sherry. It was so great to connect with you guys and to learn. I really have learned a lot. If nobody else has learned anything, I have learned something. Okay, I see a question in there. Oh, I have a question. Okay. If you guys have time for a question.
Yeah.
So someone says at the beginning of the session, you guys both mentioned food should either be hot or cold. Is that only for preservation? Specifically, should bread be kept on the counter or in the freezer? That's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah, so bread can be kept at room temperature, or it can be frozen. We do not recommend putting it in the refrigerator because that yeah, okay, yeah, so no fridge. The actual temperature of the fridge will make the bread go stale faster. Yeah.
Okay, I'm guilty of putting it in the fridge. That's wow. Okay, that was a really good questions. Thank you so much for that.
I should mention there are some specific like the gluten-free bread varieties, certain ones, like certain things they may say keep in the refrigerator. Those are obviously okay, but your typical breads are not going to be do well in the fridge.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. A person says thank you. She's on the right track. Yes, Tams, you're on the right track. Thank you so much, guys. If there's any other questions, let me know and maybe I can send them via email to Jennifer and Sherry and they can give us some feedback on them. But thank you guys so much. It really, you could have been anywhere on this beautiful evening, but you chose to be with us, and that means a lot. So thank you so much, ladies. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I will see you next time on the Med to Be, guys. Bye.
Thank you for your